Hello, you're watching Agenda Awani with me, Lukman Haris. Now, in an uncertain economy, a lot of initiatives have been announced by the government to spur entrepreneurship among Malaysians. Now, we need not look far, but the 2024 budget just announced recently, where a slew of announcements was shared by the government to encourage entrepreneurship amongst Malaysians. Now, this is a big topic that requires hours and hours of discussions, but I do just have half an hour with the titan of industry, Malaysia's own entrepreneur, which has made it big and may offer a few stories and lessons and tips for future entrepreneurs, especially amongst Malaysians. So I'm going to keep this intro short because there's a lot of things that I want to ask you. Datuk Sri Vijay Iswaran, Executive Chairman of the QI Group. QI needs no introduction, but it has over 2,000 employees. It operates in about 30 countries, and it was once voted one of the best companies to work for in Asia. Now, Malaysians are very risk adverse when it comes to entrepreneurship, and we've touched a bit about this also before the cameras rolled. So I want to start with that. How do you manage the risks, given that you're exposed to so many different markets and so many different industries?
Well, initially when we started out, we were a basic startup. So the issue of managing risks per se was not as relevant as survival.
Yeah, 98, right?
Exactly, in 98. It's 25 years now on marking. So at that time, survival being critically important, risk itself kind of blended into the background. We just had to get past the next, benchmark. So risk is something that comes into play when you are a little bit more comfortable. Like Malaysians being risk averse right now, as you said. Let's pick up on that for a minute. The fact of the matter is, we were not always so.
Really?
Not when I was growing up. I'm as much of a budak kampung from Terengganu, and I've been around West Malaysia as well, Ipoh, Penang, so on. And at that time, Malaysia was still regarded very much a burgeoning third world country. We were just coming up, so nothing to be afraid of, no safety net.
Nothing to lose, basically.
Exactly. Right? So, and if you look at our sportsmen in the 70s, for example, my favorite topic, if you don't mind for a moment.
Sure.
We had a football team that came, they were all jago kampung saja. They just came from the streets and they played amazing football. We had badminton players who challenged the world's best. Hockey, we made it to the semi-finals, in the 75 World Cup.
Right.
We had Jagadisan breaking the Asian speed 100 meters, right? Rajamani, etc., etc. We had so many people that we were proud of at that time without the resources, strength, and training that we have today. So this issue of risk is, analyzing risk sometimes paralyzes us. So in terms of our own company per se, when we grew, it was organic. So we did a lot of backward integration wherever we saw the need for a product, because we were an e-commerce platform and we were building this across Asia and onto Africa and the Middle East. As a product line became a lot more sustainable, and it became profitable for us to do something, that's when we would either take over the company, the vendor that was providing us the service or the product, or we would alternatively build our own manufacturing. So that's how we actually grew. Risk per se is not something we spend too much time analyzing. I, for one, am the last person who likes to do postmortems.
Really?
We fail, we keep on moving.
Right. So, the fact that you started in 1998 speaks volume. It was the height of the financial crisis. Nobody had really wanted to start a business then. So, would you say that today's generation is not just risk averse, but are you saying that they're overthinking when it comes to going into entrepreneurship?
I think that's rather obvious if you look at it. Most of them are more globally aware than we were. And some of the advantages of being, katak di bawah tempurung, so to speak, we were so focused on what we needed to do now within the premise of what we can do and not too conscious about what needs to happen across the world, And that, in a way, freed us. All right? We didn't look at competition. We were not worried about that too much. We were just focused on building the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. So that's how we started. I think that is what our entrepreneurs need right now. Urgency. It's a sense of urgency is a very powerful motivator, and they say that necessity is the mother of invention.
Yep. Well, many people look to enter entrepreneurship really first as a kind of a side gig, a side job, which would explain why the sense of urgency would not be there. They still want something to fall back on. Now, do you think this is the way to go, or you just go all in like you did in the 90s?
Yes, we did go all in, but by the same token, I think today's gig economy, for example, the up-and-coming gig economy is the way for the millennials, the centennials, and all of that, because they need to first have a first brush with entrepreneurship. For us, for instance, when I was going to school and so on and so forth, we were prepared to do whatever it took, work in whatever jobs we needed. When I went abroad to study, I did everything from being a security guard to a gas station attendant to driving taxis even.
And then you didn't come from a privileged background.
Oh, no.
So let's make that clear, right?
You can't get more middle class than me. Both my parents were government servants.
Right.
So I had to survive, and that was the key. And because of this brush that I had with these various entrepreneurial surviving tactics or background, I was able to do it with full gusto when the time came for us to go all out.
Right.
So our problem is we don't have that brushes, today with our kids. And they need to have a lot more of that.
Right. That was in 98. So
Yeah.
fast forward about 20 years.
Yeah.
The pandemic hit. A lot of people, a lot of companies, small and big, are still, trying to move on from the effects of what happened 3 years ago. So for QI, you are all over. You're in 30 countries. You have thousands of employees. You are in education. You're in travel. You're in lifestyle. So what were the main challenges for you in recovering, and not just recovering, but going back on track and thriving in the post-pandemic period?
To be absolutely frank with you, we were a bit shaken up. We were majorly shaken up when the pandemic hit.
Right.
We obviously didn't have a crystal ball, and we couldn't tell, how bad this was going to be, how long it would last. And initially, we had a bit of a nosedive in terms of sales. We became leaner, and we became a little bit more cost-conscious and all of that. We took all the steps that almost all major companies did.
Yep.
Having said that, we were fairly fortunate because we were in e-commerce. So we were in a space where business was done globally. And hence, the impact of the pandemic globally changed from country to country, region to region. We were fairly surprised on how it rebounded for us. Sales started going up because people couldn't go out to do what they could do. We became an automatic recourse. And, in fact, e-commerce took a bit of a climb during that period, and we benefited from that. So many of our departments had to get leaner, but on the other hand, there were other departments that had to be beefed up. There had to be people hired and more employees coming in because of our virtual nature of our business. And out of the pandemic grew some very powerful new economic and socio-economic system, if you like, but also new way of doing business. We were virtual. We were doing conferences virtually. We actually had a conference with literally over 100,000 people online.
Right.
Right across the world. We had, of course, our own meetings were all conducted virtually. We were able to do things without leaving the home. I had my suit on and a sarong, which became my modus operandi.
Which is not the case now, by the way. Let's make that clear. I can assure you. Fast forward 3 years on, looking back, I know hindsight's 2020, but what was the biggest lesson to you that you got from the pandemic?
Adapt, adjust, accommodate. These are values that I was taught very early in life, and at that particular point in time, they became my guiding force, so to speak. We have to learn fast to, climb up to our feet. It's very possible in business that you get knocked down. In fact, it's almost endemic that you get knocked down. But getting up again is the key. And the trick to that is simply being able to adapt, adjust, and accommodate. The more rigid you are in your thinking, in your operations, the more rigid you are in your strategy, the more difficult it is to break the pattern. So in a sense, we had to recreate the wheel. We had to start from scratch in many things that we needed to do. The pandemic taught us that nothing is forever and everything is open to change.
Right. When you talk about adapting though, I guess the scale of the group helped you weather the pandemic. You mentioned that e-commerce saved the group in a few ways. Because you are involved in so many different industries and markets, you're very diversified. Now, many companies try to diversify and they fail. How do you keep focus despite being so involved in many different sectors and industries across the world?
I think, this aversion to failure is a big problem for us in Malaysia as well, and to others who are averse to entrepreneurship. They're too cautious to approach this concept. Now, insofar as we were concerned, we failed too. The reason that we were able to diversify and we are as diversified as we are is because we tried as many as we failed in. There was a time where, for instance, we had the largest telecommunications company in the UK. That was actually the base upon which we were doing telco products across the world. But that took a nosedive when, phone systems changed, WhatsApp became free, all of this changed everything we were doing, and eventually we had to sell the company. Now, like this, we have done many other different ventures that didn't pan out so well. But the fact of the matter is we were willing to try. So we lost as many as we won, and the fact we were diversified eventually did help out, because some of them, the ones that we did win, turned out to be game changers.
Right. Nowadays, when you talk about being diversified and having a large presence in different markets, the conversation almost automatically moves to what's your carbon footprint. So I guess this is very relevant to QI because you do have a big presence in multiple countries. So you have a diverse portfolio. So how then do you balance the social and environmental impacts of your businesses with your financial performance and growth objectives? This is the conundrum that many companies face. They see being green or greener as being detrimental to their KPI in terms of numbers and financials. How do you see it?
The fact of the matter, it boils down to your ethics, as a company. So I was asked this question fairly recently in another forum, whether the business comes first or the ethics. To me, a business that is void of ethics, that is purely based upon profit, that becomes just no different from a casino, if you like. It's no different from a game of chance. It's basically driven by a different impetus. I'm not knocking it. I'm sure there are others out there who look upon this as something they do well. But that concept is what I call mercenary.
Yep.
Mercenaries are necessary, but only in the short term. We consider ourselves missionaries. We are here to build. And if you're building for the long term, ethics has to be in your strategy. It has to be built into the framework of the company. Hence, the social economic effects, the sustainability, conserving the rainforests, all of this become part and parcel of our thinking process. And usually, there is always a win-win situation where we can do both. Profit, but not at the cost of the environment or not at the cost of our ethics. So this has been our credo from day one.
Right, but for legacy businesses though, the shift to make your businesses greener can be quite painful.
Yeah.
There are a lot of changes that had to be made, losses have to be incurred, things like that. So how was the change for QI Group? Was it painful? Was it damaging for you to make the switch to being greener?
I think just like every other company, there's a cost to this. Naturally, it was painful, but it's also important to us that we have a legacy, that we continue to build a company that not just sustains itself, but sustains the community around it, and at some point gives back. Hence, our venture into education and setting up a university as well was part and parcel of us giving back. We wanted to find a way whereby we could contribute to the nation, to the community at large. And this is something that at every level we have to find a different formula to make it work. It can be done.
It can be done.
It can be done. It is painful. I mean, you're not. I shouldn't downplay this. I think every company has to face this, and the cost is there. But it's very possible for us to, cross over.
I want to go back to the pandemic. Now post-pandemic, this also relates to what we said earlier, how we opened the conversation about Malaysians being risk-averse to go averse to go into entrepreneurship. Now, post-COVID, governments around the world have placed increased importance on foreign investments to help catalyze their economic recovery, and Malaysia is, of course, no exception. What's your take on Malaysia's attractiveness for foreign investors, and why?
It's a pet subject of mine. I speak about this quite often, and one of my favorite forums to address this is the ASEAN Forum.
Yep.
I think Malaysia, as it stands by itself, is too small, both as an economy and as a population-wise. We are just too small to make a difference in the world, globally. ASEAN, on the other hand, it's over 600 million people, one of the world's fastest growing regions. We have incredible, penetration by the internet. E-commerce is wholly possible. If we brought down the barriers in ASEAN a lot more effectively, Malaysia does not think of itself as being part of ASEAN as much as it should. Because now, clearly, if you go back to the time ASEAN began, Tunku Abdul Rahman, our first Prime Minister, spoke Siamese very well.
Yep.
That helped him, create a bridge with the Thai Prime Minister at the time.
Rather now, the conversation has become, how do we beat Vietnam or Indonesia for FDI? I mean, within ASEAN, we are competing. And do you think that's a good thing?
Let me put it this way. Malaysia is actually the only truly multicultural nation in ASEAN.
Yep.
I say this, with the distinction of some of the countries in ASEAN thinking they are more multicultural. The reality is Malaysia is the only country that has less than 80%. Every other country in ASEAN has an 80% single ethnic majority at the very least. So we are more multicultural than the rest by far. Having said that, we are also the only country that bridges the north of ASEAN, the Indochina countries, and the archipelago, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Brunei, and so on. So Malaysia is that one country that bridges both the north and the south. Whether it's Vietnam or Indonesia, Malaysia is the logical, bridge and can easily step into the supply chain. If you understand the strength of what Malaysia had and continues to have, we still are fairly English spoken throughout the nation. Vietnam and Indonesia are not, which makes us a very attractive place to land. Now, if we were to be able to leverage upon the fact that being as part of ASEAN, Indonesia and Vietnam are our natural, markets as well, and the boundaries were to come down more within ASEAN, Malaysia would be the first to benefit out of that entire process.
Right.
As it should be.
What do you think needs to change?
One is the fact that, way back in the 70s, the level of English spoken in Malaysia was equivalent to Singapore, if not better. Today, that's not the case anymore. you know. But English is a very necessary and a very powerful tool, and it's required for the global in the global markets. Vietnam is chasing really hard. You know, China is making kids from the age of 4 to learn English. Indonesia is spending greater time and effort to build English into their curriculum. We, on the other hand, have slowed down. That's one. Two, the boundaries. Our cross-trade between, you know, inter-ASEAN trade can improve in leaps and bounds. You know, we need to, because this is logically, you know, the next development. We cannot go to any trading position, any trading bloc in the world as a single country.
Yep.
But when we go as ASEAN, everyone wants to listen. Everyone wants to hear. So we are geographically in the best possible place, politically so. We just need to leverage upon it.
Right. We don't have much time, Dato' Sri, but I do want to ask about this before we end. Recently, QI issued a series of Ijarah Sukuk with Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad. What is the goal and thinking behind this latest endeavor?
We had a building that was free of encumbrances, you know, sitting in the heart of KL, and it was logical for us to leverage upon that to build our university campus in Ipoh, where we are the only university in Ipoh itself. And we wanted to also work with the local banks, and out of which Bank Pembangunan was the most forthcoming. And it was they had a program called Mind, which they, you know, basically approached us with, and from there a platform was built. And I'm proud to say that Bank Pembangunan has turned out to be our ideal partner in doing this. And we are looking beyond building the campus onto further development,
Right.
you know, around the area.
Right. Seems like the sky is the limit for you. So what's next for the QI group?
Well, the QI group is basically, the last 25 years, has been driven primarily by a different generation, the generation that, you know, I represent. But we have a burgeoning young group of people within QI who are raring to go on the next 25 years. So hopefully the next leg of the journey will be as interesting as the first. I can already see the fact that we will be needing to adapt, adjust, and accommodate, and develop, you know, whole new strategies for a world that is already heading out there. But the sky is never the limit. After all, India is on the moon right now.
Lastly, for the entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs listening and watching out there, what's your best business advice for them? And what's the best business advice you've ever gotten?
I would say, never give up. Don't falter. You will fall. Get up again. Just simply get up again every single time. Eventually, you will get there.
Right. Thank you, Dato' Sri. Dato' Sri Vijay Eswaran, Executive Chairman of the QI Group. And thank you for watching Agenda Awani. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.